You could hear a pin drop in the ballroom the moment Sarah stepped in, her ivory wedding dress flowing like waves behind her, and every eye turning not to admire but to judge. Because standing proudly by her side, tall, radiant, and unapologetically black, was the man she loved, Marcus. The air was thick with whispers and stares, not because of the couple's joy, but because Sarah's family couldn't stomach the truth, that their daughter had fallen in love with a black man. And not just any man, but a man who had worked twice as hard for half the credit, who came from a neighborhood her family only mentioned when watching the news, and who wore his confidence like a crown. The night should have been filled with love. Instead, it brimmed with tension, subtle insults, and the kind of racism people try to hide behind wine glasses and forced smiles. But to understand how it all led to this moment, to the gasps, the tears, the shocked silence that overtook the wedding reception, we have to go back to the beginning, to when Sarah first brought Marcus home. It had started innocently enough. Sarah, raised in the upscale suburbs of Connecticut, was the kind of daughter people in her neighborhood expected to marry a doctor, lawyer, or CO. Someone from a good family, meaning white, wealthy, and well-connected. But Sarah had never cared for what was expected. She was bold, empathetic, and drawn to stories, culture, and people who broke the mold. So when she met Marcus, a talented architect from Chicago with roots in South Side grit and brilliance, she was captivated. He didn't just talk about his dreams, he built them. Brick by brick. He talked about the schools he wanted to design, the forgotten communities he wanted to uplift, and the homes he'd someday help create for families who were used to being displaced. To Sarah, he wasn't just handsome, he was revolutionary. But the first time she brought Marcus to meet her parents, the coldness was instant. Her mother, Carolyn, smiled too tightly as if her face didn't know how. Her father, Richard, offered a handshake like it was an obligation, not a welcome. Her brother, Chase, laughed awkwardly every time Marcus spoke, not knowing how to process intelligence that came with a different accent, a different rhythm, a different skin. And when Marcus, being the gracious man he was, brought a homemade sweet potato pie, a family recipe from his late grandmother, Carolyn took one bite, forced a compliment, then tossed the rest in the trash when she thought no one was looking. But Sarah saw it. She saw all of it. The way they ignored Marcus's stories. The way they interrupted his sentences. The way they introduced him as a friend, when the neighbors popped by unexpectedly. And each time she tried to talk to them, her parents deflected. "It's not about his race," Carolyn said. "We just don't think you're compatible. He's intense." Richard added, "You're from two different worlds, Sarah. That's not hate, it's realism." But Sarah knew the truth. She knew when Chase made jokes about welfare and rap music. She knew when her aunt whispered about the risk of mixed children. And she especially knew when her grandmother on Christmas Eve muttered loud enough for the whole room to hear, "I guess our family's legacy ends here." Marcus never once lashed out. He didn't lose his composure. But Sarah could see the pain in his eyes. Could see the polite mask he wore cracking around the edges. And still he stayed. For her. Because love for Marcus wasn't just emotion. It was commitment. But the deeper they fell, the more vicious the subtle attacks became. They criticized his job, even though he was up for an architecture award. They called him aggressive, when he simply voiced an opinion. They questioned his intentions, accused him of being opportunistic, of using her to climb. But they never said what they truly meant. They didn't have to. So when Marcus got down on one knee beneath the willow tree in the park where they first kissed, and asked Sarah to marry him, her tears were real, and so was her yes. But the storm that followed? That was unlike anything she imagined. Her parents threatened to cut her off financially. Her mother cried, begging her to think about the consequences. Her father warned, "If you do this, don't expect support from us." The guest list began to shrink. Relatives who once adored Sarah suddenly couldn't make the trip. Her childhood friend, Allison, ghosted her entirely after saying she didn't want to be involved in a political statement. But Sarah stood firm. "Love isn't politics," she said. "Love is truth." And so they planned the wedding without her family's money, without their blessing, and without their approval. Marcus's family, on the other hand, embraced Sarah with open arms. His mother, Denise, called her "my daughter" the moment she hugged her. His uncles laughed and barbecued and offered advice with pride. His nieces braided Sarah's hair at the bridal shower, giggling and calling her princess. For the first time, Sarah felt what family was supposed to feel like: warm, honest and full of joy. On the wedding day, Sarah arrived at the venue, a modest but beautiful garden space with sunflowers and jazz musicians playing softly in the background. Marcus was already there, looking breathtaking in a navy blue suit, nervously fixing his cufflinks while his best man, Terrence, cracked jokes to calm him down. Sarah's dress shimmered in the light. The makeup was flawless. The air carried promise. And then, they arrived. Her parents. Carolyn, Richard, and even Chase. Uninvited. Dressed like they were attending a funeral. They walked down the aisle without smiles, took their seats like they were hosting a silent protest, and refused to make eye contact with Marcus or his family. Guests noticed. Whispers began. But Sarah kept her focus on Marcus. Until the ceremony began. Until the moment came when the officiant said, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." And from the third row, Carolyn stood. Silence fell like thunder. Sarah's breath caught. Marcus clenched his jaw. And Carolyn, voice trembling but loud, said, "I can't let this happen. Sarah, I love you. But this isn't right." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The moment Carolyn's voice echoed across the garden, you could feel the temperature shift, not just from the words, but from the audacity it took to interrupt a daughter's wedding in front of nearly 100 guests. Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach, and for a brief second she wondered if she'd even heard her mother right. But she had. Everyone had. Carolyn's face was a complex mixture of desperation and denial, her mouth trembling but her gaze fixed. "Sarah, I can't sit here and watch you make the biggest mistake of your life," she said louder now, every syllable dripping with conviction and prejudice wrapped in maternal guilt. The guests gasped. Marcus's mother, Denise, reached for her pearls, appalled. Marcus stood still, shoulders squared, but Sarah saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes, a pain he didn't deserve to feel on the day he was supposed to be celebrated. "This isn't love," Carolyn continued. "It's rebellion. You think this is strength, but it's foolishness. You're throwing away your future." Sarah took a slow step forward, her veil fluttering slightly in the soft breeze. "Mom," she said, her voice shaking, "please sit down." But Carolyn didn't. "Do you really want to bring children into a world where they'll be confused, judged, and unwanted by both sides? You think this ends well? That this is some fairy tale? It ends better than the ignorance you've cloaked in concern my whole life," Sarah snapped, louder now. The crowd murmured again. Her father, Richard, looked away, ashamed, but Chase stood with folded arms, nodding like he agreed with every word their mother said. The officiant tried to recover, politely clearing his throat, "If there are no further objections," but Carolyn interrupted once more. "I will not be part of this charade. I refuse to sit back while you disgrace this family name." And then she did the unthinkable, she turned and walked out, heels clacking loudly against the stone aisle as she stormed away. Richard followed hesitantly and Chase shrugged, muttering, "Guess we dodged a bullet," before trailing after them. For a long moment there was silence. Then Denise, Marcus's mother, stood, lifted her glass of water in the air and said, "To my son and his queen. May the people who walked away today stay gone." The crowd clapped. Not all but enough. The ceremony continued, bruised but unbroken, and when Sarah and Marcus said their vows, their voices cracked from raw emotion, but their words were laced with a kind of unshakable truth. "I don't just love you," Marcus said. "I choose you. Against hate. Against judgment. Against anything that tries to divide us." Sarah said, "I'll never apologize for loving you. And I'll never stop standing beside you." The crowd rose in a standing ovation when they kissed. The reception began, a live jazz band playing Marvin Gaye classics under warm garden lights. Sarah tried to hold on to the magic, but the absence of her family lingered like a cold wind. Still, she smiled through the first dance, through toasts, through laughter. But Marcus noticed the tightness in her jaw. "You okay?" he asked softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I will be," she whispered. "Eventually." But what neither of them knew was that Carolyn hadn't gone home. She'd gone to the press. A tabloid site the family had quietly used in the past to protect their image. By morning, a scandalous headline surfaced on several social media blogs. "Elite suburban heiress marries street architect. In controversial ceremony, parents walk out." The article quoted anonymous sources about criminal associations in Marcus's past, fabricated accusations, twisted school records, and false claims that he'd once been suspended for fighting and vandalism. The comments were brutal. The racists showed up quickly, calling Marcus everything from thug to grifter. A few local outlets even picked up the story, repeating lies without verifying anything. Sarah read the articles in stunned silence, her coffee going cold as her fingers scrolled through a nightmare of misinformation. "This is character assassination," she said to Marcus, her voice shaking. "This isn't just sabotage, it's war." Marcus clenched his fists. "They're trying to bury me because I refused to bow." Sarah's phone rang, her best friend Mia, who had been in the bridal party and worked at a PR firm. "You need to see this," she said. "This isn't just a smear campaign, it's calculated. I traced the press submission. The email that sent it all came from your cousin's fiancé's business IP. That's a connection to your mom's lawyer's firm." "You're saying my mother orchestrated this?" Sarah whispered. "I'm saying she paid someone to destroy your husband's name. On your wedding night." But the worst blow came when Marcus's employer called. "We need to place you on temporary leave while this gets sorted. Our donors are nervous." That was it. That was the line. Sarah stood, shaking with rage, and looked at Marcus. No more silence. No more apologies. They want a war? Then let's go to war. "We'll need evidence," Marcus said. "We'll need to be smarter than them." And that's when Sarah made a decision she'd never thought she'd have to make. She called her estranged Aunt Rebecca, the one family member who'd been disowned years ago for marrying below her station. Rebecca had receipts. And what she revealed next made Sarah's blood run cold. "Your mother has been running this kind of smear game for years," Rebecca said. "But I have files. And trust me, you're not the first target she's tried to destroy for stepping outside her vision of perfection." "Can you prove it?" Sarah asked. "I can," Rebecca replied. "But it comes at a price. Because once we go public, the family won't just hate Marcus. They'll come for you too." Sarah looked at Marcus. He nodded once. "Then let them come. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths." Sarah couldn't believe the depth of what Aunt Rebecca revealed. File folders of emails, invoices, private investigators hired by her mother to dig up dirt not just on Marcus, but on others who had shamed the family name in Carolyn's eyes. Former girlfriends of Chase, old business associates of Richard. Even Rebecca herself had been targets in carefully orchestrated smear campaigns designed to preserve a pristine image of whiteness, wealth, and control. It wasn't just personal, it was a pattern. "Your mother's not protecting the family legacy," Rebecca had said. "She's rewriting it, erasing anything she doesn't like, including people." And Sarah realized then, this was never just about Marcus's race. It was about power. And Carolyn didn't know how to handle not having it. Armed with evidence, Marcus and Sarah retained an attorney known for handling racial defamation and digital harassment. Together with Rebecca and Mia, they prepared to expose everything. But they didn't just want revenge, they wanted accountability. They began with a carefully worded social media post. Sarah uploaded a photo from the wedding, her and Marcus hand in hand, radiant with love. In the caption she wrote, "When love offends the privileged, they try to bury it. But the truth always finds light. We're speaking out tomorrow. Stay tuned." Within hours the post went viral. Black Twitter rallied behind them. Activists and celebrities reshared it. People started tagging the wedding blogs and news outlets that had regurgitated the lies, demanding retractions. And then the family began to panic. Chase called first, trying to play the neutral brother. "Look, Sarah, things got out of hand. Maybe we all said things we regret, but putting this on the internet—" "No," Sarah cut him off. "You stood there and smirked when Mom tried to humiliate me. You didn't stop her. You laughed." Then came a call from Carolyn herself, cold, clipped, defensive. "I've seen your little post," she said. "And I suggest you take it down before this gets uglier." "You don't get to threaten me anymore," Sarah said calmly. "You declared war at my wedding. I'm just defending myself now." "Don't be dramatic," Carolyn snapped. "You're making us all look like racists." "You did that yourself," Sarah replied, ending the call. The next day, Sarah and Marcus went live on social media with their story. Calm, composed, and truthful. They showed the fake news articles. They played audio of Carolyn's comments at the wedding. They presented emails and payments made to the tabloid site. And then they dropped the real bombshell, Marcus's side of the story. His suspension in high school? It was for defending a classmate who was being racially bullied. The vandalism accusation? Dismissed. The criminal connections? Fabricated from a second cousin he hadn't seen in 10 years. Marcus laid it all bare. And when it was done, he said, "My only crime was falling in love with Sarah. And for that, I was publicly crucified. But not anymore." The internet exploded with support. News outlets issued apologies. Influencers who had remained silent now spoke up. Sarah and Marcus were flooded with messages from interracial couples who had faced similar pain. But the backlash at home grew fierce. Carolyn was forced to step down from her social club's board. Richard's business faced boycotts. Even Chase's fiancée broke off their engagement, saying, "I didn't realize how toxic your family was." But Marcus wasn't rejoicing. He wasn't vindictive. "I don't want to destroy them," he told Sarah one night. "I just want peace. I want to build, not burn." But peace wasn't what Carolyn had in mind. 1 week later, Sarah received a letter from a lawyer representing her parents. A cease and desist order claiming defamation of character, demanding she take down all posts and apologize publicly or face a lawsuit. Marcus's attorney laughed out loud when he saw it. Defamation only works when the truth isn't provable. We have evidence. If they want to escalate, we can file a countersuit and subpoena everything. But Sarah felt the weight return. "They really want to destroy us," she whispered. "Even now, after all the truth, they can't let go." Marcus held her close. "Then we don't back down." That night, Sarah posted again, this time with legal documentation attached. "We've received a threat disguised as a lawsuit. But here's the truth, silence is what they want. We're choosing light." The momentum didn't stop. National TV shows reached out. Book publishers wanted rights to their story. But then, something happened that changed everything. Mia called again. "Sarah, I need you to sit down." "What's going on?" "I think your mom's not just smearing Marcus. I found a trail, offshore accounts, shell companies, and something way bigger. And I think your dad's in on it." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, heart pounding. "I'm saying, your family might not just be toxic. They might be criminal. And you just made yourself their biggest threat." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. Sarah sat in stunned silence, Mia's voice still ringing in her ears. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. Possible criminal activity. This wasn't just a family argument anymore, it was a powder keg. And her wedding, her love story, had become the match that threatened to ignite it all. "What exactly did you find?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. Mia, ever the professional, wasted no time. "There's a company registered in the Caymans. On paper it looks like a family trust. But the money flowing through it doesn't match your father's public income. Millions have moved through it over the years, much of it around election cycles and land acquisitions. It's not just tax avoidance, Sarah. I think it's bribery. I think your father's been using the family image to cover something dirty. And my mother? Connected to several transfers. Some under her maiden name. She knows. She's part of it." Sarah clutched her chest, her mind reeling. Everything suddenly snapped into focus. The obsession with appearances, the control, the desperate smear campaign. This wasn't just about hating Marcus. This was about exposure. "If you go public with this," Mia said, "they'll come for you hard. I mean legally, politically, personally." Sarah looked at Marcus, who just walked into the room. She told him everything. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. "Then we dig deeper," he said. "If they want to bury us, we give them a shovel made of truth." The next 48 hours were a blur. Marcus called in contacts from his community work, people who'd once fought displacement by corporations tied to Richard's developments. Several remembered shady deals, one even had copies of letters from lawyers trying to silence them. Meanwhile, Mia handed over the financial evidence to a journalist she trusted. Within a week, the first story dropped. Wealthy Connecticut family tied to offshore scheme and land displacement scandal. It didn't mention Sarah or Marcus by name, but the timeline was unmistakable. Then came the subpoenas. Authorities began an inquiry. Sarah's phone lit up with calls from unrecognizable numbers. Threats. Bribes. One voicemail said, "Stop now or you'll regret this." But they didn't stop. They showed up at the town hall, standing beside the victims her father's company had hurt. Elderly Black and Latino homeowners who had been forced out of their neighborhoods, now finally speaking out. Marcus delivered a speech that brought the room to tears. "They tried to shame us for loving each other. But the real shame is stealing homes, silencing truth, and calling that legacy. We don't need your legacy. We're building our own." Social media erupted. The narrative had flipped. Sarah and Marcus were no longer just the couple who stood up to racism, they were uncovering corruption. But then, like a wounded animal backed into a corner, Carolyn struck back. She went on television. With perfectly done makeup and crocodile tears, she told a carefully rehearsed story. "I'm just a mother who was concerned about her daughter. This isn't about race. It's about safety. Marcus is dangerous. And Sarah has been manipulated by people with agendas." The interviewer asked about the wedding. Carolyn blinked, pausing. That wasn't a protest. It was heartbreak. And then she dropped her own bombshell. "I have proof that Marcus assaulted a man years ago. I've turned it over to the police." Sarah almost screamed when she saw the clip. "What is she talking about?" Marcus's hands shook slightly. "She's talking about Jamal." "Who's Jamal?" "My old friend. When I was 17, I stopped him from attacking his girlfriend. There was a fight. He lied to cover himself and I took the fall. But no charges stuck. No conviction. Just a file. And now she's using that?" Marcus nodded slowly. "She's desperate." But it didn't matter. The press had latched onto it. Headlines screamed, "Violent past," and "Husband of whistleblower under fire." Sarah paced the room. "We have to get ahead of this. We need to show the truth before they weaponize a mistake you made trying to protect someone." That's when Marcus made a call to Jamal. They hadn't spoken in over a decade. The conversation was short, tense. But then, unexpectedly, Jamal agreed to meet. And the next day, in a press conference streamed live, Jamal stood before the world and told the truth. "I lied back then. Marcus didn't start the fight, he ended it. He protected someone. And I let him take the blame because I didn't have the guts to admit what I did. I was 17. And I've lived with the shame ever since. He's not violent. He's the best man I know." The internet roared in response. Support came flooding back. The backlash against Carolyn's media stunt was swift. Sponsors pulled from Richard's company. Their attorney released a statement distancing themselves. But just when it seemed like the tide was turning for good, Sarah received a hand-delivered letter. She opened it and read the first line out loud. "The state of Connecticut is opening a formal investigation into the financial activities of Richard and Carolyn Whitman," and just below it, "and any potential whistleblowers or beneficiaries." Sarah's heart stopped. "They're trying to drag us into this. Legally. They're trying to make us collateral damage," Marcus said quietly. "If they go down, they want to take us with them." "What do we do now?" Sarah whispered. Marcus looked her in the eye. "We go to court. Not just to defend ourselves, but to finish what they started. You ready?" Sarah swallowed hard, then nodded. "Let's end this. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths." The courthouse steps were swarming with press, microphones, flashing cameras, and the loud hum of whispers. Sarah gripped Marcus's hand tightly as they emerged from the car, their faces calm but hearts pounding. They weren't just walking into a courtroom, they were walking into the eye of the storm. The state investigation had reached critical mass. The Whitmans, once considered untouchable, were now named in a sweeping financial misconduct case involving shell companies, illegal land seizures, fraudulent grant usage, and tax evasion. But what shocked Sarah most was that her name, had been dragged into the mess. Carolyn and Richard had claimed that Sarah was a beneficiary of their trust, and thus should be investigated for willful knowledge and association. It was a desperate move, a final ploy to smear their daughter and take her down with them. But what they hadn't expected was just how ready Sarah and Marcus truly were. Their lawyer, Ms. Nia Holloway, was a force of nature, brilliant, strategic, and unshakably composed. She filed a pretrial motion that not only refuted the Whitmans' claims, but presented the mountain of evidence they had gathered over weeks. Digital records, financial transactions, recorded conversations, and a growing list of witnesses who were no longer afraid to speak out. Aunt Rebecca testified. Former clients of Richard's shady real estate deals spoke. Jamal returned, this time submitting an affidavit. Mia, the tech-savvy friend, provided forensic proof of Carolyn's digital footprint in the smear campaign. And through it all, Marcus and Sarah sat side by side, silent, strong, and steady. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stood tall. "This trial isn't just about money," she said to the judge. "It's about how power is used to silence, manipulate, and destroy. I was told to choose between love and loyalty. But loyalty built on fear is not loyalty, it's bondage. And I chose freedom." The judge listened intently. After weeks of testimony, the decision was handed down. Carolyn and Richard Whitman were found guilty of fraud, malicious defamation, and obstruction of justice. Fines were levied. Assets were frozen. Richard's business license was revoked. Carolyn's private club disavowed her. And as for the smear campaign? Declared slanderous and intentional, with damages owed to Marcus in full. When the verdict was read, Sarah felt a tear slip down her cheek. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of freedom finally landing on her shoulders. In the days that followed, the internet exploded again, this time with celebration. Headlines praised Sarah and Marcus as the couple who took on the elite and won. But they didn't stay in the spotlight. They retreated quietly into their life, bought a modest home in Chicago near Marcus's old neighborhood, and began building the future they wanted. Not one based on inheritance or legacy but on truth and love. Marcus opened his first community-centered architectural firm, hiring local interns and offering design services to underserved areas. Sarah became a speaker and advocate, helping others facing family-based discrimination. Their wedding video, once stained by scandal, was re-uploaded, and this time it went viral for all the right reasons. The kiss, the vows, the strength, the unity. Months later, Marcus stood on a stage receiving a Community Impact Award. Sarah sat in the front row, pride beaming from her smile. "I was once told I wasn't enough," Marcus said in his speech. "That I wasn't the right color, the right background, the right image. But I stand here today not because I proved them wrong, but because I stayed true to who I am. And because one woman chose me when it wasn't easy. That's what real love does. It doesn't conform. It transforms." The crowd stood, clapping until their hands hurt. And as Sarah joined him on stage, wrapping her arms around him, there was no longer a trace of shame. Only power. Only pride. Only love. True love doesn't ask for permission. It stands in truth even when it costs everything. Sarah and Marcus showed that family isn't defined by blood, but by loyalty, respect, and courage. They proved that racism, no matter how polished or subtle, has no place in love's story. And that when you stand up to generational prejudice and refuse to be silenced, you don't just break cycles, you build legacies. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths.